Hey, what's up, you guys? Today we have another car review in store today, but this time it's actually Chevrolet who we're going to be talking about. This is a 2020 Chevrolet Malibu LT, which is a mid-size sedan, and in fact is the only sedan left in Chevrolet's lineup at the moment. A car like this is actually for rent right now on Hertz, and that's actually how I was able to get a hold of this Malibu right here. So if you want to learn more about what cars they have for rent and other cars similar to it, I'll have a link in the description down below. For now, though, there is a lot to talk about with this car, so without further ado, let's go ahead and hop on in, start her up, and let her run. Chevrolet has quite the history when it comes to sedans and sports cars and coupes and the like. The Malibu is actually a mainstay marquee for them. Having been in production for nearly 60 years, technically speaking, the Malibu has been around since 1964. Went out of production in 1983 before returning in 1997 and still runs in production today. Right now, though, this is the only sedan left in Chevrolet's lineup after the compact Sonic sedan was discontinued, and so was the Impala full-size sedan, as well as the SS, which was a total flop. But enough of that history lesson, because now it's time to get inside the car and start discussing everything that goes on in the Malibu. And that starts with the key, which is a fairly standard Chevrolet key. Nothing too special there. Just press the door handle. There's actually a button there to actually let you in as long as you have the key with you. So that is just your basic regular key fob. And when you climb inside the Malibu, you have a nice mix of ebony and leather. So it's a nice mix of a bunch of materials, but don't expect anything too fancy. This is the LT trim, which is sort of the midway trim. So if you're going in, if you want something fancier, you might want to consider either the RS or Premier trims, which are a little bit more expensive. We'll discuss pricing and stuff later. For now, we've got to start discussing all of the features, and that means, of course, starting up the car. To do that, first, you take your key, doesn't matter if it's in your pocket, in your hand, or just drop it in the vehicle itself, like right there. Then, put your foot on the brake pedal, and hit the engine start-stop button to go. Now let's discuss the features, starting with the auto start-stop button. This is actually becoming a lot more common in cars these days, but for those of you who are new to the car industry, I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown. The auto stop function basically stops the engine when you're at a stoplight, or a stop sign for that matter if you really wanted to, and will actually shut off the engine just momentarily. Your air conditioning and infotainment are still running, don't worry. But once you take your foot off the brake pedal, it'll actually get going again, with no effort needed from the driver. Now let's step outside of the vehicle and discuss some of the exterior features. One of them, of course, being the exterior brake lights, or actually just two of them. You would think that it was actually four of them, considering that there are four white spaces. Nope, it's actually two. And in fact, one of them actually becomes the turn signal when you flip the switch over on the driver's side. But those two inside are actually just dummy lights. The ones on the outside are the ones that really do all the work. Alright, now let's pop the hood of the car, which unfortunately is a two-step process. Step 1, pull that lever right underneath the dashboard, close the door. Step 2, disengage a hook that is right underneath the hood itself. It's a little bit tricky, but especially if you're holding a camera like I was right there. But once you do that, then there's your 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, which is pumping out 160 horsepower and about 184 pound-feet of torque. So it's certainly not newsworthy amounts of horsepower nor torque, so don't expect to get very heavy rev notes out of this thing unless you mod it somehow. But this is all linked to a continuously variable transmission, which is really your typical PRNDL, or Prindle as it is commonly known, for those of you who are not really frequent car viewers. But there's the engine for you. So yeah, I think we should move on to the back. What do you think? Moving on to the back of the car, you're actually able to open up the trunk using a rubber pad that is located right underneath the Chevrolet logo. And when you do, you actually have a very spacious trunk. I was able to fit myself in even. I don't recommend you try it, of course. Don't worry, I wasn't being kidnapped. I was voluntarily throwing myself in. In fact, it's so spacious that you actually have room for some extra carpeting and the spare tires underneath, which you would expect out of most cars. But even then, I'm amazed at how really spacious the trunk is. Now, if somebody else threw you inside their Chevrolet Malibu against your will, don't worry, or at least not as much anyway, because the government now mandates that these grab holes be in place, and that is certainly the case in this Chevrolet Malibu. Alright, now with the trunk aside, now that we're in the rear end of the car, we might as well get some exhaust notes, or at least what we're able to anyway. Now let's take a look at the infotainment screen, which is actually fairly normal for a car of this size. Now, I'm not exactly a big fan of the fact that now you can't scroll through which radio station or the like you want. You actually have to push buttons. That's something I'm not really a fan of. At least that's just my personal opinion. However, it's relatively easy to use beyond that. Just like that, you can just hold to set your favorite radio stations like I just did. Another thing that's fairly easy to do with this infotainment screen is actually use Apple CarPlay or Android Audio, depending on which one you have. Take your cable, whichever one you use. I usually like to use the USB-A cables. Plug it into your phone. Just like that, you're actually able to use Apple CarPlay, and it's relatively easy to use. Now, I won't go exactly too much into depth because most people should know what Apple CarPlay is. But for the newbies, once again, I'm happy to explain. So, Apple CarPlay is basically more so of your iPhone in a car, where you can listen to music, take a call, even read out messages, all that good stuff that you would usually do on an iPhone, except you can do it in a car in a relatively not so distracting manner. And personally, I just really like this feature, so of course I was going to show it. Alright, back to materials and the like. So the steering wheel itself is actually wrapped in this sort of ebony-esque leather-like material. Not really sure which it is, considering it does feel rather unique. I will say that for sure. Now, the mirror, the blind covers are actually really small. I was expecting them to be a little bit bigger than that. But given that this is a car that is relatively low to the ground compared to, say, an SUV, of course, I guess I shouldn't take me by that much surprise. Now, the seats, they're actually pretty comfortable. Don't expect, again, anything too fancy. You can have plenty of room for 5, that's for sure. And speaking of room for 5, that leads me to the bench seat in the back for the 3 other passengers that join you in your Chevrolet Malibu. Now, the seats back here are actually pretty comfortable. You have 2 spaces for your air vents, which are, again, really small. But again, no surprise given this is a mid-size sedan. You have some space for your cup holders, which are a little bit oddly shaped. And you have more cup holders right there, which is just what you'd expect and very convenient for your fellow passengers in the back. Now, this is something I'm not a fan of this car. And it's the fact that you can't actually pull down the seats just like that. Well, you can, but it's a little bit more complicated than you'd expect. To show you what I mean, let me demonstrate. So in order to fold the back seats, you actually have to do them by a 2-step process. One of them which involves going into the trunk of the car. You got to pull these levers here. You got to pull them back. And then you get back to the back seats where you can actually just push them forward. And that's the complex-ish process of folding the back seats of the Malibu. It's, again, something I'm personally not really a fan of. But that's what Chevrolet chose to do. And another thing I'm not really fond of is this seatbelt that I actually am not too good at capturing. I have no idea how to unbuckle it. If anyone can show me how to, then please do, because that was something was not fond of. But enough about panning the car. Let's just get to some stuff that I actually like about the rear end of the car, starting with the fact that it is very spacious for someone like me who is a relatively shorter person than most. So I can actually stick my legs up pretty easily, and then the cup holder space actually comes very much in handy to increase that comfort aspect of the car. And actually on the left side, the entire bench seat, I actually have enough room to just go to sleep if I really wanted to on the back seat of this car, which I really like. Again, something I don't like is, of course, that really complicated process of having to go to the trunk to fold the back seats forward, which, I mean, I guess I can understand if you're going to the grocery store, you might as well put some more space down there, but at least the cup holders are there, which is nice. On to stuff I love about the front seats. This is my favorite part about the entire car. It's not necessarily just the fact that it's a sedan and I like sedans. It's actually the fact that the seats, the front seats at least, recline entirely, which is awesome. I just really like that idea. And it'll especially come in handy one day on a long road trip. where I can get my rest relatively easily. This was something that a previous Chevrolet I had, an Equinox, did not have, and so it made road trips really uncomfortable and cramped. However, said feature is here in the Malibu, which is awesome, but that's only if you're the driver. If you're the passenger, at least in the LT trim, you can still recline the seats entirely and move them however way you want. However, this is not by power. You actually have to do it manually using the good old levers that you would expect out of a pretty old car, which, I mean, it's not exactly what you'd expect if you're in a pretty cool car like this, but it is understandable as you are trying to save costs and just make it a more affordable car. So after folding the seats entirely back, then this is what it actually looks like. They actually have very good room, but people in the back will have to deal with it. And then you have an easy fuel cap. Quickly onto the glove box. It's very small. That's all I have to say. Don't expect to get much in here. Alright, so how much is all of this going to cost you? Well, there's several different trims to the Malibu. You start with the L model, which actually starts at $23,265. The LS starts at $24,395. The RS, which is $25,395. Or the LT, which is the one that we just reviewed right now, for $27,795. All of those come with that 1.5 liter turbo 4-cylinder engine that I had mentioned earlier. However, if you feel like you might want a little something more, then consider the Premier trim, which is the highest trim available on this car. That is packed with a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine, made it to a 9-speed automatic that is not continuous variable transmission or CVT. That will set you back $34,495. So it's definitely the pricier one of the bunch, but you get a lot more out of it, and that is certainly nice because the LT model actually, while it's a great car, don't get me wrong, but it still leaves just a little bit to be desired. So the Premier trim is probably your best option if you are going to get the Malibu, or the RS if you want a little bit of a sportier look, as I personally desire. Some other stuff I forgot to mention about the infotainment screen is that by mandate of the law these days, at least in the United States, this car does come with a rear view camera. However, this trim does not include the sensors. You actually have to purchase them separately if you want them. And then it actually has these plus and minus, these gear shifters. However, I noticed after I was done recording that you can actually only use those if you put the car in the low gear mode, which is something I'm not exactly really fond of, but that's what Chevrolet chose to do. I do wish that at least it had some paddle shifts or something similar, but this isn't exactly a sporty sedan, so I'm not really surprised about it. And it's little details like these regular headlights in the front, but some LED lights for brake lights in the back that actually put forward that this car isn't really a sporty sedan. It's more of an economic one. That's not a bad thing though, because the Chevrolet Malibu actually has a lot of good stuff going for it. Sure, it might not have all the fancy tech or the luxurious, the cool seats or the sporty driving, but for an economy car, for what it's trying to be, it actually does the job pretty well. Has a very spacious trunk, some nice interior features, very spacious interior relatively speaking, and it looks pretty good. So do I recommend this car? Sure. If you're looking for a mid-size sedan that'll just get the job done, I definitely recommend you have a look at the Chevrolet Malibu. With that, we are done here. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and as always, catch you guys in the next one.